Okay, we're live now, and
All right.
okay. Let me start for a while, dear attendees. We're waiting for our dear host Peo to join us. He's finishing the previous session, so Peo is here. I leave the floor to Peo to present Jacobus. Good luck, guys.
Thank you, Milan. Jacobus, good to see you. Everybody, we have with us Jacobus Geluk with Agnos AI. And if I have to take this is an amazing combination because you have a lot of capable people. I've seen a lot of people with vision, but when you add the courage and the ambition, something very interesting happens. And Jacobus is a very rare combination of capability, vision, extreme ambition, and the strive to deliver amazing stuff. So, yeah, Jacobus, please, we know each other through the years. Tell us about your latest great deeds.
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. So we at Agnos AI, we are helping our customers with creating their EKG and getting it in production, getting it delivered. And we did now, our team has several people that did that several times already, big banks. And lately this year we have delivered in production at LGT Private Banking a use case that we call legal entity management. And I will briefly discuss that and show a little bit how that's set up. But let me start with the presentation. So what is the agenda for this presentation? I would like to briefly explain what is an EKG and what is the journey that we would see and that would we propose to our customers. An approach, then briefly the legal entity management use case, and if we have time for it, a discussion. And if I guess you can add your questions to the chat. Okay, what is an EKG? Let me start with a very simplistic picture. See the EKG as something that you could also say it's an ecosystem knowledge graph. See that's something that end users see as one thing, just like you see the web. It's the web of data. It's like a beautiful world where all your data is connected, where you see the holistic view of anything. And end users do not have to see all the technical systems and all your data sources, all the mess that you might have or not behind that layer. It's in that sense a service-oriented architecture, service layer. There's nothing new there, but what's new that this is completely distributed, federated, and can scale infinitely, just like the web. So that's an important message to understand, that EKG is basically the combination of all your data sources, all your knowledge graphs. It's a federated web of knowledge graphs. So, and that gives you, it does all kinds of things. It converts all your data from any form into a graph of triples or facts. That can be done with any data source, not just triple stores, you don't have to buy Ontotext GraphDB for all your data and replace all your systems with Ontotext GraphDB, although Ontotext would like to have me say that maybe, but of course, an Ontotext GraphDB or any triple store can be supported, will be a very good way of storing your data, but it's not necessarily the case that all your data has to be in a triple store. You can leave it where it is, basically. You can connect your enterprise knowledge graph layer, service layer to whatever data source. Then it also converts that data into machine-readable meaning. And that gives you a whole bunch of additional capabilities, because it allows the knowledge graph to reason over your data and create, it enables all kinds of new use cases. So we add, for example, not just the raw data, but we add executable models, and eventually you would be able to run use cases that do not require any coding. And what we did at LGT Private Banking, and I can talk about it publicly because we did a presentation with them in public on the enterprise data world, and this is this goes a little bit deeper than that presentation. But what we delivered there is a use case where we can basically claim that there's zero code. We only have code in the service layer, which is completely generic and has nothing to do with the use case as such. So what are the benefits? As I said, it's like a facade in front of all your technology, which then provides one unified digital user experience, and it connects all your data. It provides a 360-degree view or holistic view, so you will, for anything, it could be a contract, an employee, a supply chain, or a transaction, anything. Every object in your world, in your ecosystem, will basically be represented as a thing in your knowledge graph, and will have a URL that you can click on, and will have basically look like a web page in that sense. And it also enables very high levels of reuse, and I cannot emphasize that enough. The reusability is key to this. It's not just ontologies but also data sets that we can reuse. You basically publish all data sets from all data sources next to each other. You don't try to create one model of anything. It's like you just have all these all these versions of the truth next to each other available, where at the use case level, in a specific context, you combine the data that you need. So what this is basically like we have to explain this as a journey. It's not something you can do in a couple of months. It will take time, and expectations have to be managed. And for that, we are developing with the Enterprise Knowledge Graph Foundation a maturity model. And that maturity model, I will discuss that in a minute, but the maturity model, we came to that because we have had some lessons learned. So the first lesson is that you cannot start an EKG with just a POC. Because in one POC, you will only do one use case or one solution. You basically create yet another silo. And an EKG needs to do is more than that. It's like you can maybe show what a knowledge graph is and demonstrate the power of graph. Fantastic, but how do you show a data mesh, a data fabric where all your data comes together with multiple use cases, where reusability of existing use cases in building, basically creating all these Lego bricks, building up other use cases with the use cases that you built in a previous project. That's not possible to show that in a POC. So you will have to compete with other teams in the company, and they will use their bread and butter technology stacks like Java and Oracle or SQL Server, Power BI, etc. They will do it faster, cheaper, better when it comes to just one use case. And it will also have a very low probability of getting production, because you're introducing all kinds of new technologies and people don't know how to support it in production. Security questions, that people will see this as a new animal that they don't know, and you can't get it in production in reality. We made that mistake many times. I'm doing this now for 12 years full time. Made many mistakes and many failed POCs, and came to the conclusion that that's not the right approach. What is also an important lesson to learn, that we learned at least, is you have to build your own team. The company needs to own this. It needs to completely sit on top of this, needs to champion the mission of EKG. And that mission is a long-term story. It's not just about technology. It's much deeper than that. So you can only do this top down. You have to basically get management involved. It's not the technology, it's management. And I say this jokingly, but it's about leadership, vision, strategy, creating the leeway in the mandate so that people can, so that you can give this an honest chance. And you need to manage expectations, of course, and that's what leads to what I wanted to say about the maturity model in the next slide. So we have this approach: plan, build, run. Let's start with this. This is the maturity model of the EKGF. And let me explain this picture. We basically see the need to address 4 different audiences. First and foremost, of course, the business audience. They need to know what do you want, not the how. Let's discuss the what. What is your strategy or business vision even? What is your strategy? How do we translate that to use cases? Then we have the organization where we talk about roadmaps and planning and budgets, budget that go beyond just the simple use case that you start with. And each of these audiences has their own lingo. Like we have to address them in their own lingo. We cannot just talk to the business talking about ontologies, for example. That does not. So the data people, however, they want to know everything about ontologies. How does that affect their current way of thinking? How does that affect data management in general, data governance, data quality? All those topics need to be addressed. And the same goes for the technology stack, for the technology pillar. Technologists want to talk about scalability, reliability, resilience, security, architecture, and so forth. And then we have the 5 levels that we see, and we are trying to describe that in the Enterprise Knowledge Graph Foundation, where each of those levels has metrics where we can assess you on the level. Where are you? Are you at level 1 already? Level 1 is not an POC; it's a lighthouse project, and we would like to call it that because it's more than a POC. It's something that actually goes in production. And it's an example project that will educate everyone else to say, okay, this is how you do it. This is how you start building up your EKG, and this is the plan. This is the roadmap. Then at the platform level, you will do that for multiple use cases, for many use cases. It starts to work around, and I think with several of our customers, we are now at that level. I don't think that anyone is at level 3 yet, to be honest. Level 3 is a really big step to make. That's where the Enterprise Knowledge Graph really becomes an enterprise, starts to become an enterprise asset, and becomes the standard for like all your data, connecting all your data. And of course, we need to explain level 4 and 5. No one has done that yet, but that's where we go. Those are the nirvana levels. That's where we see the long-term vision. This is where the world goes when it comes to connecting all your data. So, what is the best practice? Like I said, like with the business, we want to discuss the vision, strategy, discover all your use cases, build the use case tree, which is a thing that's a new thing. Like we want to basically introduce that term here, and we are using this now for a couple of years as a methodology. Basically, we want to make sure that the business, organization, data, and technology audiences are all talking about the same thing. And a use case tree is that structure of the EKG. Because you don't have any silos anymore in the EKG, but you still need to be able to define scope, the scope of your modules, let's say, for the modular structure of your EKG, and that's why we use the use case tree. And I will show that example later. So when it comes to the organization, like the organization, we need to talk about roadmaps, rate log, backlog, budgets. All kinds of different types of budgets. How do we get things? culture, for example, how do we hire the right people? There's a lot to discuss there as well. And like I said, for data, we talk about strategy, governance, etc. I will not repeat myself here. So at EGNOS, we have that, that's our plan, build, run. It will pay off, let's say, to do proper preparation, planning, create a shared vision with the business. What is the vision? What do you want to accomplish? For example, at LGT, they said, like, we want to be able to offer bespoke services to our primary to our main customers. That is an important goal to make. That's the vision. So okay, that's fantastic. So how do we do this? How do we translate that into action? Then we discover the use cases. Don't choose a use case too quickly. It has to be the right one. I used to work at Bank of New York, where we did a large knowledge graph in 2016, and we wasted a lot of time in all kinds of use cases there that did not have an impact. And we eventually delivered dozens of use cases, actually, but many of them were basically a failure because they were not the right use cases. So that lessons learned there. Like, you have to structure your EKG roadmap in such a way, and that's where the use case tree comes in again, so that you find the right use cases to start with. Then an assessment is necessary. Like, are you ready? Do you have the right people? Do you have the right processes? Is your technology infrastructure okay? That's where the maturity model comes in, that we can basically check the boxes. Okay, where are we? What is the proper expectation that you can have here? And so forth. A little bit of training might be necessary up front, some sort of education, because all the players and all the key stakeholders and all the departments that you work with, all the dependencies that you have with other departments, you need to be able to communicate that and basically put people on the same page. And last but not least, in the plan phase, chart your way to a proper business case, for example, and explain what success means to the business, explain and then deliver on time and deliver quickly, agile, etc. So this is not a waterfall proposal. We are very agile, but agile does not mean that you don't think ahead, and that's what the plan phase is for. Then, whilst you're working on, okay, you selected your use case, you have the budget, you have the leeway, you have the mandate, you can go. You can build that team, and what we as EGNOS then provide is coaching and helping you accelerate that team, but it's you doing it. And of course, as soon as you can, get things in production. Don't wait till the last minute. Don't do big bang deploys. Get things in production as frequently as possible. Sorry. And then you have to think about how do you do the operation side of things. How do you keep it stable? How backups, disaster recovery, etc. And how do we continuously optimize this and get this flywheel spinning? All right, let's talk about the legal entity management use case. And I would like to switch to, this is a picture here, but I have a bigger one here. So this is a example of the use case that we built for LGT, but we left out all the details. So this is basically just a painted picture in Miro at the moment, but you get the message, I hope. There's the top use case is legal entity management, and that is broken down into subcomponents. And each of those subcomponents is just a model. It's part of the knowledge graph itself. So we have, for example, a legal entity address. Let's start with a simple one, which is linked to a use case, countries, regions, and jurisdictions, which is a subcomponent of business registration, and so forth. And so we have all these different use cases, and each use case has stories. We call that stories, and each of these stories eventually is kind of a Let me scroll to this part of the screen here. You will see an example. Set legal entity ownership. There's a description. It works on a specific graph in this case the metadata graph, but there can be multiple graphs involved. It has a status in the software development lifecycle. In this case, it's in production. We have the various input types, so the input concepts and the output concepts for each user story are there, and we basically translate what we call stories, basically APIs. Every API is a story. And APIs are implemented with Sparkle or with SQL or with any technology. Doesn't matter. We use Sparkle most of the time, but it could also be a call to another system, another API, etc. So we keep basically all the technical details away from any discussions with the business and the business owner. We just talk about use cases and how they are broken down into user stories that they recognize. It's their system, it's their use case. Like if we talk about share and ownership, then these are the use cases that we are talking about. And for example, we have use cases that are very generic. Like for example, workflow. The workflow use case is totally reusable for all kinds of other higher level use cases. So it's basically a generic workflow engine, all model driven, where you have all kinds of stories like get the workflow stages, so view all the open workflow requests and so forth. So this is basically how we organize a knowledge graph. This is let's say looking down from legal entity management, looking down into all the various components of a knowledge graph. But you can also look up. I'm not showing that in this picture, but legal entity management itself presents a capability for the business. You can manage your legal entities, which is quite important for especially a bank. But for any large organization, I would say, and you could literally reuse this use case in any other organization. In that sense, it has nothing necessarily to do with banking as such, but in itself, it will become part of higher level business capabilities. And so it is important to not only look down in your use case tree, break things down into deliverable components, but especially also to look up, because when you start designing your use case tree, designing your use cases such as workflow, why would we make that extra effort to make it completely reusable, for example? Well, we know that workflow will be useful in all kinds of other contexts as well. Legal entity addresses will be reusable in all kinds of other contexts, not just for legal entity management. So each of those use cases has a potential reuse, a reuse potential, I should say, and that needs to be discussed and described. And okay, and actually, if you start thinking this way and building everything with reuse in your mind, then eventually that becomes the practice. Basically, that is the way you do things, and we can claim that everything we did in this particular project is reusable. There's nothing that is so specific that it can only be used for this particular customer, this particular product or the project. All right. Going back to this presentation. So why did we start with legal entity management? The pros are it's a core use case for any EKG, because it's kind of the standard. It gives you a proper legal foundational structure for EKG. All your other use cases might actually be directly or indirectly related to legal entities at some point. So that sense is a good one, but the negative side of it, it's non-glamorous, it's boring, people get hardly excited, if ever, about legal entities, of course. And the devil is in the details. There are so many details. We're talking about hundreds of stories and dozens of use cases, and there's all these details. You don't get any brownie points for that. So that needs to be clear. Like we need to communicate that properly. And okay, it takes time to deliver this, but we delivered this within a year, and that includes building up a team, building up the whole platform. So I already said this, all of it. Oh yeah, like important to say here, like this is, you could see this as a no-code or low-code. Those are terms that are becoming more and more popular. That's what I mean with executable models. Like everything we build is just data in the knowledge graph, and that's executed by generic code. All right, that was my presentation. We have 5 minutes left for questions.
Perfect timing, Jacobus. Thank you very much. Like I really enjoyed, especially as like the process part. Well, we have a quite discussion in the comments, but if I might be subjective here, Jesus and Dean are agreeing. We need the magic behind being able to determine which are the good and which are the bad.
Sorry.
Inception. Good. Again, share the magic with us. How do you find which are the best use cases?
Yes, well, that is like you first need to know which use cases are candidates, right? And that's like if you just zoom in too quickly on the technology, because often when you talk to even data people or even business people, it talks straight away about Ontotext GraphDB, which is maybe great for Ontotext, but how, like, we need to solve problems, right? And the technology is just plumbing. Let's say we can talk about that. Basically, I would say delay the discussion about technology as much as possible. Like the technology is not the problem; it's what you want. That's the problem. Do you know what you want? So we need to be able to create that picture of all these use cases. Okay, this and the capabilities, and it should align with the business strategy. So we want to talk to the business and okay, what do you want? Be at the table there. Discuss how do you want to compete? What are the things that where this could allow you to make more money? That discussion needs to be had, and then we can translate that into a use case tree, and in that use case tree we can find the right candidates.
Thank you for this. Okay, with this regard, help us understand better what a lighthouse project means in this flow.
Yeah, that comes from the digital transformation world. It's an example project. It has a lot of things in one. Basically, it goes beyond what a POC is. We're not proving the concept. The concept works. The technology works. Don't doubt that. That's not a problem at all. It's much more about explaining that this whole new world where we introduce basically about 10 different paradigms. It's not just semantic technology, but all kinds of other things like executable models, for example. We bring all these paradigms in one project and demonstrate how that works in production, linking multiple data sets together. And that is what the Lighthouse project is supposed to do. Success means in this case that people will really understand what this is for the long term and see this and start seeing this as a strategic asset for them.
And Dean has an excellent observation that the boring problems, like the one that you described, are actually foundational. They make the money. So
yes, and of course, if you mess up with legal entity management, then you will not make any money. It will go. So it has to be done right, of course. That's why I mean the devil is in the details.
And please note that the Miro board has like a rising interest. So anything you can share, I would be also very interested in hearing, learning more about the detailed use cases. Like we were quick to review it, but whatever you can share, I'll be very interesting. And there are many more people in the audience. And with Steve, like the grouping of the use cases, what for an approach is this? And we have half a minute, so I don't know if we should go one-to-one to discuss this.
No, yeah, we are working with the Enterprise Knowledge Graph Foundation to write this all down and to discuss this with other practitioners. We're talking to people from Wells Fargo, for example, and all kinds of other banks that are involved in this discussion. and we're trying to set these practices basically, and that includes that use case tree story.
Thank you very much. Excellent timing. So let's close this session. You can continue discussion on the platform because there are plenty of comments, but let's switch to the final one, the presentation of Pete. See you in the next session.
All right. Thank you very much.